boom, 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 boom. All right, we are live. Welcome to Dynasty Saturday Night 5, Dynasty Fantasy Football show on the Going for Two live network. Please subscribe, rate, and review if you're listening to the Going for Two audio podcast feed. If you're watching us here on YouTube or any other visual app, do all the things that help the algorithms on the things that you're watching us on. If you're here on YouTube, stop right now. Below me, thumb, subscribe, bell. Boom. Right now. Good. You did it. You get a cookie. Good person. All right. Yeah. And really just from a more serious and sentimental side, we've talked about it a couple times, but life has been very lifey for the both of us from all sorts of areas of our personal lives. And we have not been consistently here week to week because, real life comes first. And, I'm very glad to be back on the mic talking Dynasty Fantasy Football. As much as those things are more important, I do miss this, and it is good to get a chance to do it and to do it with you, my co-host, Josh Walker. How you doing?
I'm doing great. It has been great kind of taking a week or two off from being in 20-something fantasy football leagues, but at the same time, it's like you said, it's nice to get back away from life for an hour or two during the day just to talk about other things. So I'm happy to be back. Hopefully it will be more consistent.
Right on. A couple minutes before you popped on, there was a penalty on number 69. And, I'm just one time I want a ref to go, holding offense, number 69, nice. And then, just as if nothing happened, just proceed with it anyway. So we are the Dynasty Saturday Night 5. We use lists of 5 to talk about Dynasty Fantasy Football. And tonight we're going to talk a little bit about certain players that I don't want to be dramatic and say they're at a crossroads or anything like that. But I think they're at a critical juncture where we have to decide, well, do we believe the case for them or the case against them? And then what do we do with that? It's called Dynasty parentheses indecision because honestly, this is a time of year that I will admit I'm very indecisive, right? I'm still part of doing my rookie process, so I don't have my pre-draft ranks finalized or whatever, right? Free agency hasn't happened. All the coaching and coordinator changes haven't been finished, right? So there's a whole lot of uncertainty for so many players, and I guess there's moments in this time period where, say between this now and say the Senior Bowl or the Combine or free agency, where you can maybe hop on some values and if you guess right and speculate right, do well. For me personally, it's a time where not only am I a little more indecisive about all this stuff, but I'm kind of taking that breather, from fantasy football. So my transactions tend to be slower, but I think it's worth just, thinking about okay, here's some players that, I think the theme here is that a lot of them have kind of fallen and were disappointments. And so then what do we do with them? So how are you during this time of year and how did you approach sort of picking these players that we're talking about tonight?
Yeah. So at least one of the players is just I genuinely don't know what to do with. So I'm kind of put him in this episode to kind of bounce it off you. So maybe you can help me decide. The other ones, it's just guys who, before we even know anything, you can either sell or buy low on now before news starts to hit, before players start to move to other teams, before coordinators come in, especially guys you really believe in. So that was part of it. And around this time, honestly, because I like baseball so much, I'm about to join a DC area fantasy baseball league. So I am kind of taking a step back from Dynasty. Someone sent me a trade the other day. I looked at it, and it took me 3 days to get back to them. So I'm I just need, a second. So it's definitely a time to chill, get my thoughts together, and really almost game plan and attack for when I do pick it back up around when we really start hitting the rookies, what I need to do so I can do it in less time than usual.
Yeah, I think it's a great time to do audits and autopsies and inventory and, come up with each league kind of what your approach is going to be. So when it comes to specific moves, I'm not making too many, yeah. All right. Well, today's show is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Underdog has it all: player pick'ems, DFS, playoff, best ball DFS, other major sports besides football. I've heard there are some major sports besides football. I think Josh can confirm at least one of them is baseball. Yeah, and so if you're a new customer for Underdog and you go to the app or you go to underdog.com, you can deposit up. Well, you deposit however much money you want, and Underdog will match up to $100 of that deposit when you use the promo code GF2, right? So if you're a new account, make your first deposit. Underdog will match up to $100 of that deposit if you use the promo code GF2. If you're looking here on the screen on your video situation, we have a nice shiny QR code for you to scan, and you can go to the app or to underdog.com. Do your thing, deposit some money, start playing, maybe start winning. I know that for me personally, I'm not going to be in those best ball streets in March, but like I'll probably be in them by May. So gonna be dangerous for me with all those best ball drafts, but we'll see how it works. All right, so time for Dynasty Indecision, and do you want to kick us off? And who do you want to kick us off with?
Yeah, I'm gonna start out. I'm gonna start out with one of my sells because I have a few more sells than I do buys. So I'm gonna start off with Christian Watson. As someone even coming out, I've been slightly lower than consensus on him. A lot of that is because I'm starting to get the vibe now that he's similar to a player like Chase Claypool. He has like all the tools. He has size, speed, athleticism, but he just never really has consistent year-long results. And I put emphasis on year-long because we've seen flashes of Christian Watson being really good. But at the same time, through 2 years, we haven't seen it, whether it's from injuries or just not being able to get open. And right now, I have him ranked as the third wide receiver on his team. I have Romeo Doubs ahead of him and Jaden Reed even higher. And there's also a possibility with Dontavian Wicks coming through to where that's just going to kind of be an unsavory situation where there's so many people to throw it to. It's going to be hard for one person to dominate the touches. And if anyone did, I think it would be Jaden Reed just because you can get him the ball anywhere on the field. He's had consistent hamstring injuries, which I'm really starting to look at different injuries in a different light, and hamstring is one of them. They linger, and guys who have been plagued with that their career, it's really been a hurdle for them to get over. Jerry Jeudy's kind of that way too. And honestly, at this point, I'm okay with being wrong. Like if he does bust out, if I sell him for a 24-second plus or a veteran receiver like Mike Evans or Devontae Adams, if I can get that out of him, even if he does a lot better than where I have him ranked, I'm fine with that. I can live with it.
Yeah, I dig it. Like for I think he's a perfect fit for this show because it's like, okay, we had that rookie year, right? And we saw that there are definitely flashes. There's reasons to lean into the upside and the ceiling. Ryan Heath, by the way, on Fantasy Points, did 2 really, really good articles that included the bull case for Christian Watson from a data perspective. And I was on board, This year, we've had another sort of set of data, and besides the injuries, it has been, while on the positive side, the emergence of Jordan Love as a sort of a viable NFL and fantasy quarterback, but also that, as you said, we have a lot of people who can catch balls, right? We have 2 good tight ends. We've got a rookie contract wide receivers as well. Bo Melton is like their wide receiver 6, right? Even like Malik Heath and Grant DeBose is like their wide receivers 7 and 8 is like, those are good practice squad guys.
They're not terrible, yeah.
And so I think when you add all that up, it kind of says, okay, well, moving forward, he's probably going to be like a high ceiling, volatile, week to week guy that is sort of borderline better in best ball prototype, right? Like, is that going to be what he is? Like, I think he can be more. I think the talent is there, but just the situation kind of screams week to week, it's going to be unreliable.
Yeah, and I meant that in there. I have him ranked as the wide receiver 40. He's just outside that massive tier, and I'm below market on him because KTC has him at wide receiver 30, and Fantasy Calc has him at wide receiver 32. So I am a little bit below consensus on him by 8 to 10 spots.
I'm at 34, so I'm a little higher than you, but in that tier of 33 to 40 for me. So he's there with, I think, similar young-ish for the most part, yes, guys with upside, but with sort of like uncertainty, right? Like Josh Downs, what's the role going to be? For Downs, I love Downs, but like, what's his role going to be? And he hasn't, like the flashes in the early beginning of the year didn't really stay consistent throughout the year. You've got George Pickens, which is kind of a boom bust guy. You're going to talk about him later. A guy that I'm going to talk about later, Jahan Dotson, Hollywood Brown. Like, what team is he going to be on? Chris Godwin, is Evans going to stay? Like, Ridley's a free agent, and Amari Cooper. Like, is Deshaun Watson coming back? Is that a good thing for him? And he's 28, 29 now. So
29.
that kind of tier for me is like wide receiver 2s that are kind of bordering on wide receiver 3s that like have a lot of question marks. So I think, let me put it to you this way. If you were looking to acquire Watson at a good price to, reap the rewards if the bull case plays out, let's say, what would you pay for him?
Like I said, if I had him, I'd want a 24 second plus. But I'd give, if I liked his upside, I'd just give a second, and hopefully that'd buy it. Hopefully a 25 seconds, so you can keep the 24s. But probably a second round pick, I'd give that for him just to take a shot.
There are definitely places I think that'll work. I think because he was going for like, earlier in the season, like a late first and stuff, So
yeah.
All right. So you know what? I'm going to talk about a guy who got traded for him straight up a few days ago, according to Fantasy Calc, and that's Jackson Smith-Njigba, right? So, everybody's wide receiver 1 for the most part in the 2023 class. He ends up on Seattle, and it's like, all right. But, I love the talent. So, like, he kind of like maintained his ranking for me, and I'm still above consensus on him. I think he showed very good flashes as the year went on, which is what you want to see. You want to see rookies make progress. So, what's the narrative for him? Well, he was a rookie. He got hurt in the preseason, which delays the timeline, right? He's running as the third wide receiver. He's running as the third wide receiver on a team that isn't balls to the wall, like, pedal to the metal all the time. If they can run and win, they will. They're not like one of those super aggressive teams that just tries to, pile up points because no lead is safe and all that jazz, right? And, with a coach, and I know this is narrative, but this stuff like matters sometimes. It colors the edges and stuff. We have a guy like Carroll who, is not always great with rookies. He's good at managing veteran personalities, and I don't think was going to let Lockett really like lose that role unless there was some really glaring reason for him to do so. And so now we go to the case against him, right? Production wasn't there, especially relative to rookie sensations that came out of nowhere that were drafted well after him. Like, well, not nowhere, but like some of them nowhere, like Rashee Rice, Tank Dell, Puka Nacua, right? All these guys drafted well after him who outperformed him. We don't know if Lockett's going to leave, so he could still be running among the 3 wide receivers there. There's uncertainty as far as who the coach and OC is going to be. With Carroll staying on as an advisor, I don't know that the sort of team culture is going to change all that much. I don't know if Shane Waldron's still going to be the OC if they give Dan Quinn the head coaching job, right? And so is there an opportunity for a discount here? I think so. I'm still very much in on JSN from a talent perspective. And that we've seen sort of what do they call it? Oh geez. Proof of concept, right? That he can play in the NFL and do well and beat NFL defenses and score touchdowns and work in that offense. Just didn't see it a lot, right? So I have him still ranked at wide receiver 12. He's in a tier of 10 to 19 for me. Recent trades, a JSN and a first for Devonta Smith and a second and a third. I'll take the JSN side. JSN straight up for Watson. I'll take the JSN side. Here's a couple.
Was that Zach Pulowski that Love you, Zach.
I want your opinion on these two: JSN, Addison, and a second for Jamar Chase. JSN, Javonte, and a first for Jamar Chase.
Say it one more time.
JSN. Let's do the first one. JSN, Addison, and a second for Chase.
That's pretty tough. I think I might take two of the receivers in the pick.
I might too. Chase is so good.
Because Addison, I was worried about Addison's touchdowns his rookie year coming in, and he looked pretty good. There were some inconsistencies, but that's to be expected. So,
again, I think it's one of those. So there's different philosophies, right? So one person will say, oh, if that's a start 11 or a start 12, it matters more to get that second, receiver. And then there are other folks that say you never tier down off that elite guy, unless the plus is really good and that sort of thing. The second one, I think I'm more on the Chase side, and that's JSN, Javonte Williams, and a first for Chase. I get that the first is juicy. I think I'd rather have Chase.
It'd have to be like a top 3 first to do it for me.
So the cap that Seattle has is -$4 million and -$9 million. -$4 million is like their cap amount, and then there's something called like the effective cap. So I don't know, whatever. So I put both figures in there, but let's be conservative and assume they're already -9. I don't know that Lockett stays, right? Lockett has an out in his contract. And so I'm going to listen, teams don't just get rid of viable wide receivers when they can, I don't know, play around with the contracts of other guys and cut offensive linemen or some shit like that. So it's not guaranteed, but I think I'm going to lean into the talent, the draft capital, the fact that Lockett's probably moving on, and if not, he's aging anyway, and say, give me JSN at the discount.
Yeah, I agree. If Lockett stays next year, I don't know how much I'll move him down, but it will kind of sour it for me a little bit, because I feel like, especially Pete Carroll being there as an advisor, and this is pure speculation, but he seems like the old school guy who's not just going to put Tyler Lockett third on the depth chart behind JSN after all he's done in his career. You know what I mean? So if he doesn't move on, I don't know, but I think he will. And I think when he does, I think JSN is going to be really good, because I also have him ranked 12th. So
KTC, by the way, is at 21 and Fantasy Calc is at 19. So that's low for me. I get that I was way too slow to put Puka ahead of JSN. I'll own that, but come on, guys.
That's a little bad.
Who's your next person?
All right, so I'm going to go with one of my favorite buys. That's Marvin Mims. I have him ranked well ahead of consensus. I have him ranked as wide receiver 37. He's right there near where I have George Pickens and Christian Watson. KTC has him wide receiver 50, and Fantasy Calc has him all the way down at wide receiver 61. And this is just me trusting what I saw on tape in my process during during last year's rookie season. He has 4.3 speed. He can go up and catch the ball. He can track it really well. So I don't like the way he was used, and I'm not a coach, so it feels weird for me to critique something like this. But his yards per target were 11 yards, and I think that's just way too high for someone who can catch the ball at right at the goal line and get 10 to 15 yards every play, because he has really good yards after catch ability. And then you also got to factor in Jared Jeudy, at least in this offense, is not going to be what many of us had hoped. And I think there's a good chance he's not with the Broncos next year. So if that happens, that's just an easier way for Mims to get some playing time. And this is one of the ones where I think now's a good time to go ahead and go buy him before things start to happen, because you can get him really cheap at this point, especially if you're higher on him than I am.
Yeah, that I love the player, Marvin Mims. I think I have him slightly lower than you. I've got him at 43, and a next tier down. Because what was it, week 1 or week 2? It was oh, there you go. That's how you got to use Marvin Mims. And then Sean Payton didn't do it for the rest of the season. The quarterback, I was listening to the Debbie Royale did a good show breaking down the actual NFL teams and what their paths to what they could do at quarterback and likely landing spots. And they made a pretty good case. I forget the details, that quarterback is still going to be Jarrett Stidham. So if the coach is still Sean Payton and the quarterback is Jarrett Stidham, I mean, I'm in on Mims at the price because the price seems to be like, I don't know what, 2/3, right? But I'm scared. I'm scared.
Yeah. I want them to use. I'm not saying he's as good as Jaden Reed, but I think he has similar skill sets where they should be like manufacturing ways to get him the ball in space, and they're just not doing that. And that's just feels like stubbornness from Sean Payton to me.
I think people still think that Mims is like deep ball only.
Yeah,
and he's not. And I think Sean Payton's he's a little tyrant. He's a little emperor. And I fear that, I can trust, I don't know, Traquan Smith and Marcus Callaway. So I'm going to.
Tim Patrick coming back.
Yeah. KJ Hamler, although he went to Indianapolis.
Yeah.
Callaway got signed to a futures deal in Pittsburgh, but still I just kind of expect that bullshit from him. So yeah. But yeah, I mean, you know me, I love the player. Right. All right. So I'm going to do another wide receiver. Just because 3 out of my 5 are wide receivers, so I might as well do another one. Jahan Dotson. I like Dotson. He really grew on me coming out of college. I mean, he was definitely not in that big tier of 4 that I had, but he was kind of right after that with guys like, I don't know, for me, Pickens and a couple other guys. Like, he was right after that. He got first-round draft capital. It was a slight surprise for me, I think. Very good skill set, flashed well in the rookie year. Yes, there was some touchdown cologne, but there was reason to believe that even if the touchdowns went down a bit, the volume was going to increase. We've got a new offensive coordinator, Eric Bieniemy. Things are going great. And then this year, and the weird thing about this year is that it was a combination of the way that Bieniemy used him and rotated through the receivers and the number of routes they ran. But also, I think towards the end of the year, there was some evidence that he was kind of half-assing it. He was kind of mailing it in. I think he was a little upset at his usage and the direction of the team and them losing. And I think he kind of was not putting in max effort. So, he's now, for me, at wide receiver 37 in a tier of 33 to 45, as I mentioned before. KTC 42, Fantasy Calc 47, right? So this guy has really slid. And I think, definitely opportunity for a discount, right? Is the lack of effort for him an argument for him in the sense that it's not talent, right? And it was just it's just him, it's just between his ears and the fact that he was used poorly, or is an argument against him because if it's between his ears and he's going to be a volatile guy or a diva or whatever, then that's not going to be good for fantasy production, right? So there's that push and pull. Can we assume that Drake Mayer, Jaden Daniels is probably going to be the quarterback there? I think so. That's a good thing, but they are rookies. Is Bieniemy still going to be kept as the offensive coordinator by whoever the new coach is? Not likely, right? But, who knows, right? They hire a defensive coach, and he's like, all right, Bieniemy, you ran the Chiefs offense. Go ahead, you can stay here because they didn't fire Bieniemy, right? So, is that could be a bad thing if he continues to get used poorly, right? So, I mean, there's opportunities. He's gone straight up for a third, straight up for a second. I'll throw a random second, random seconds at Jahan Dotson, right? And then I like this one. This is interesting, right? It's because it's also a commentary on, I think, Jordan Love and Tua, right? It's a Tua and Dotson for Jordan Love and Trey Palmer.
I mean, I'll take the Tua and Dotson.
Yeah, that's an easy one for me, and I actually like Love more than I used to, and I like Palmer.
Yeah, I was about to say I love Palmer.
Yeah, so the team, as I said, with the coach, the OC, they're probably not going to be drafting a wide receiver, at least with any high draft capital. Maybe a free agent, but the free agent class isn't great. They might lose Curtis Samuel because he can leave. Their cap, though, they have a lot of money to spend, right? So if there is a free agent that they do want to grab, I'm hoping that money and those draft picks are more towards offensive line and defense and don't really mess with Dotson much. And so thinking about like what the team needs are, and that on the other side of this, he's probably still going to be the wide receiver 2 on Washington with a very likely better quarterback than Sam Howell. Like, I don't know. I think I'm still in on giving this a try, and I'm certainly in if that's the price.
Yeah, I agree with you. I would gladly give up a second for him. And there's just one thing I wanted to point out. It's 2 career paths that are kind of similar. And I just want to preface, I'm not saying the players are similar, but if you look at Jahan Dotson's first 2 years compared to Nico Collins' first 2 years, I think Nico had 2 years with 480-ish yards and a couple touchdowns, and Jahan Dotson's had 500-something yards and a few touchdowns. So I'm not completely out on guys after 2 years. I do believe in that third year, finally when they hit their stride. So I'm with you. I think he will be the wide receiver 2. And I'm kind of torn on how to take mental things because I'm going to talk about it with George Pickens next. I got to be consistent with it, and I'm starting to think it's not a good thing. Like, I know the talent's there, but that's something maybe he'll mature as he gets older, but guys like DK Metcalf, that's like the biggest thing holding him back is him getting so frustrated and taking themselves out of the game. So,
well, there's nothing holding Kyle Senra back. Hi, Kyle.
True.
How you doing? Thanks for popping in and checking us out.
All right. Yeah, so I'm just going to go ahead and jump right into George Pickens here. I'm not too far behind consensus, but this is the one person I said at the start that I just don't know what to do with because there's a very valid case for pros and cons of George Pickens. I have him ranked as wide receiver 31. He's at the end of that massive tier. KTC has him at 26 and Fantasy Calc at 30. So I'm right there with everybody else. And, he surpassed 1,000 yards this year. Touchdowns weren't as high as I expected them to be. But his yards per reception is like 17, 18 yards. So that just kind of shows me that he's still just a boom bust player that doesn't have a good quarterback, doesn't have good rapport with his quarterback because he was targeted over 100 times and had only 60 something. I can't remember off the top of my head, 60 something receptions. So he's not catching a lot of his targets. He's slamming his helmet, deleting the team off of his social media. It's just not a good look. And I don't know how that's going to translate the rest of his career if he's going to stay there. And if he is, I just don't think Kenny Pickett or anybody else they go get because they have bad draft capital is going to be able to save his career. So I could see him getting 1,500 yards and 10 touchdowns, or I could see him being a good Gabe Davis. So I just kind of have him in the middle.
I've warmed up on him a little bit, and I have him at wide receiver 35, in that sort of tier with some volatile and uncertain guys. But everything you said is right. Like, like what else can you really say about like his attitude and what he's done? So here's the thing about that kind of stuff, though. A new offensive coordinator and some that will hopefully boost production just by the way that they do formations and motion and route combinations and things like that will go a long way to calm down that stuff. But it's not a thing, right? Like you said, you can't completely discount that. I just look at him as a volatile asset that's kind of like, if he's cheap enough, I'm in because the talent is there and he's going to have some good weeks. But he's also just not steady. Even if the mental stuff wasn't there, I just, I kind of see him in that mold that we've talked about with Watson earlier, in that sort of, volatile boom bust sort of thing. And in a league that's increasingly, not necessarily like doesn't need big men on the outside, but, their dominance over like which wide receivers work, right, has certainly faded, right? And Jamie saying hi, checking in. Always good to see you, Jamie. Thank you. Yeah. So that's kind of. I mean, I don't know. Like, I'll give you. Would you give 2 seconds for Pickens? Probably not, right? You probably want to get out of it with like a second, a third, and Ty Chandler or some shit like that. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and there's one more thing. Like even big guys on the outside, they're out there also to block. Not just the time with Jalen Warren. He just doesn't want to block for other teammates. He just wants the ball. He wants to catch the ball. And he's like, I don't want to get hurt like Tank Dell. But dude, you're like 6'4". Tank Dell's 5'9", 160 pounds in on the goal line. Like,
well, this might be a good time to have a conversation though about like him versus Jahan Dotson. Jahan Dotson, steadier guy, much firmer floor, benefits from PPR, but ceiling wins championships, right? And so when you have a guy who's younger and has that ceiling, it's like I have Pickens reluctantly ranked ahead of Deontay Johnson.
See, I have Deontay Johnson higher. I have Deontay Johnson like 29, 28, and Pickens 35. So they're not far off. But I also have Dotson a little bit higher than – because I just think there's still room for his ceiling to grow.
Yeah. So. All right. My next guy, we're going to go with a quarterback. Let's go with Golden Boy Trevor Lawrence, right? And we've talked a little bit about Trevor here and there on shows and just when we're chopping it up. Obviously case for him, 101. Best quarterback prospect since Drew Luck, until Caleb Williams came along, right? And he has shown flashes, when you take out the Urban Meyer year and you gave him, a competent coach, he certainly took a step up in year 2. Year 3's been weird, right? Although with the addition of Ridley, we've seen him struggle, we've seen him injured. We've seen some of the numbers and the efficiency not very good. I looked at some of the numbers in the Fantasy Points data suite before we got here, and like he's doing fine. Like he's it's the expectations versus the reality that I think is coloring people's valuations of him, right? Like he was a middling quarterback in most statistics, right? But you don't want the quarterback 14, the quarterback 16 out of a guy who was 101 overall in the NFL draft that you spent the 101 in a rookie draft on, and who you counted on to be your quarterback 1 for the season, right? Now, there was a tweet that made its way around a lot. I think it was Scott Barrett, comparing T-Law's first 42 starts to some other quarterbacks. And I think it's I know, like, we don't do the, like, if you take out the blah, 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 but really that Urban Meyer year, like, do you really count that? And then, so if you take that part out and look at his numbers, it's a lot better. I think it's also, I think been pointed out by people who know ball, a lot better than I do, that really the offensive scheme is a little too vanilla, and that the weapons really aren't that good. Now, on the flip side, if your quarterback needs a really good scheme and really good weapons to always be good, is he that good? That's also a question that you have to ask, right? We have bad O-line, like among that vanilla offense as well. He needs to check down more, right? He's tall. He's like 6'6", and that's always going to be an issue with footwork and striding when you throw and things like that. So anyway, I have him still at quarterback 9 in this big tier of quarterback 5 through 11. I think some people would be mad that I still have him in the same tier with a guy like Burrow or Stroud, because to me, it's like there's the big 4, and then this 5 to 11 is that last group of guys that I'm comfortable being my quarterback 1 going into a Dynasty Fantasy Football season. So I'm not too far off consensus, but he has fallen to quarterback 11 on KTC and 12 on Fantasy Calc. And this is a guy that was floating around quarterback 6, 7, 8, even when Stroud was already in the league before Stroud blew up. Recent trades are T-Law and Burrow for 2024 firsts. Like, how are you? I'm smashing the 2 quarterbacks. Like, unless those firsts are like, 101 and 102, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, why would you even do that, right? And then this one's interesting. T-Law and Goff for Purdy in a third. I'm taking the T-Law side there. So his value is low, so I think there's an opportunity for a discount. And then some other things to consider. Ridley's a free agent, And so they're going to need to probably add a weapon there, and really a weapon that where the skill set doesn't overlap as much with Christian Kirk as Ridley's did. I think, they have some draft capital at 17, 48, and 96 to help them out there, but they do need an offensive line as well. They have some cap room at 13 million or 9 million, depending on which figure you look at. So, I think there's a bull case for him, right? And the bear case for him. I think both have good points. I think, though, the latter, the negative case against him, is, I think, too colored by the gap between the 101 generational prospect and the results, instead of just looking at just the pure numbers and value and results and that sort of thing. And so, yeah, has he fallen from Golden Boy? Sure. Am I still in? Do I still think he's super talented? Would I still be okay with him as my quarterback one going into Dynasty Fantasy Football season? I think so. I think there are reasons to believe that, they'll improve the offensive line and add a weapon. And I don't know why somebody wouldn't be in on Lawrence if that's going to be the cost.
Yeah, I moved him down right at number 10. I have him right ahead of Dak and Tua. His age I had him below Dak, but I was thinking about it. Sorry. And I'd rather have the younger quarterback because I don't think he's been 100% healthy this year.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's been dealing with some stuff playing just to try and help his team win a playoff spot. So I'm hoping in the offseason, getting healthy, he'll be even better next year. But I did move him to 10. Trying to find the right tab. Ahead of him, I got Joe Burrow, Richardson, Fields, Lamar. So I'm pretty confident keeping those guys ahead of him for now. But yeah, I think that's a good call. He's just moved from the middle to end of the first down to the beginning of the second round for me in startups.
Yeah, I think for me personally in a super flex, I'm still taking 10 quarterbacks before I take Justin Jefferson, and he's one of them. But that's me because I'm an asshole, So.
All right, I'm gonna keep it on with the quarterbacks here. I'm gonna talk about Jalen Hurts. And this is someone that I've been seeing a little bit of wild talk from, talking about how he sucks all of a sudden. And yeah, I still have him as my QB3. KTC moved him down to QB5. I think people are just being a little too reactionary about this entire team falling apart.
Mm-hmm, very much so.
Howie, what's his last name? The GM?
Roseman.
Howie Roseman still seems to be on really good terms with Jalen. I don't think that he thinks that Jalen's a problem. They've literally got a man-child frat bro as their head coach. So I think there's just a lot of issues with that team, and I don't think it's his fault. And also watching him run, I don't think he's 100% healthy either. He just doesn't look like he's running as well as he did the year before, and I don't think he's old enough to just regress like that. So I think he's dealing with some stuff. I think they got to figure some things out with that team. His touchdown upside rushing is just too good. So even if Kelsey retires, I still like Jalen Hurts as a top 3 quarterback. And I'm starting to get the vibe that some people don't. So just here to state my case for him.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I think Tua, as much as he's flawed and is probably sort of like a system-ish quarterback, right? He also, I think, is getting a little too dinged from one cold weather game, right? Here's the thing about Hurts, right? And you mentioned his rushing TD upside, right? If you look at those TDs, right, and how many of them came 1 yard away, right, and from tush push, right, and if half of those go away, is there going to be passing that makes up for it? They were just saying on the broadcast tonight how Lamar is running less this year, right? We've heard other running quarterbacks talk about running less, right? The last year or two. I think that gap between the rushing quarterbacks, which are my big top 4, and the the Strouds, Burrows, Lawrence's kind of I don't know that it's going to be as huge an advantage as the NFL favors the timing, accuracy, read the progressions quarterbacks, and as those coaching trees spread, right? I don't know that gap is going to be as big. Do I still like Hurts? Do I have him at QB4? Yeah, sure, absolutely. I think that rushing part is hard to ignore. But do I want to let me put it to you this way. Those are the guys that I want to get out on early, right? Like, as opposed to maybe some other guys. Do I think there's a significant gap between Jalen Hurts and his value and Trevor Lawrence and his value right now? I do. If in 5 years Trevor Lawrence is a top 5 dynasty quarterback and Jalen Hurts is not, would I be shocked? No, I wouldn't. Right? Because it's the play style. It's if he loses those rushing touchdowns and DeAndre Swift doesn't have allergic to end zone and I get down at the 1-2 yard line the same way he did with the line. I don't know. I think there's enough to worry about with Hurts that you put him towards the bottom of that rushing quarterback tier, and that if something presents to you that's a really good price, I might get out from under him in the next year or so.
Yeah, I'll push back on that just a little bit. I watching a lot of the games because they're on TV a lot. It's a lot of those are from the tush push, and I think Jason Kelce is a big part of that, given his agility and strength. But they also start manufacturing more runs for him within the 10-yard line. Like, they do a lot more pulling the guard or center out and getting him out in the space. And I just don't ever see Jalen Hurts take big hits. He's a really smart runner. He's not afraid to get down, and he's not going to try and run and get extra yardage at the cost of getting hurt or fumbling the ball. So, Lamar and Fields, they'll always try and stretch the extra yards. I think Hurts is a little bit smarter running than that.
Okay, that's fair. And as you said, he was dinged up this year. It's,
Yeah, he was not running as quick as he usually does.
That was clear. All right, so I'm pretty sure getting back to Lawrence, I have a trade in my inbox, right? I was watching Dynasty Theory live one night, and I was commenting to one of the hosts that I would drive the 105 to Utah if he would give me Trevor Lawrence, because he was saying that the 105 is worth more than Trevor Lawrence, right? And so I'm in a league with a bunch of Dynasty Theory people from their community, and I was sent a trade that is, I believe, the 105 and no, it doesn't have a number. 105 and a mid to late second, I think, for Trevor Lawrence. So yeah, I have the 105. So it would be the 105 and a mid to late second for Trevor Lawrence. Would you send that 105?
So you have the 105 and you'd be getting Lawrence?
Yeah.
I would do it without the second. I'd try and hang on to that second.
I agree. I think if I did counter, it would be, replacing the second with something less valuable. But to me, what I told the person, and I think I think a good idea for people to think about is right now, I think the 105 is going to be whatever, Malik Neighbors or Brock Bowers, right?
Yeah.
Just remember, go back and what you thought the first 12 picks in a rookie draft were going to look like in January the last few years, and what it ended up looking like so again, for me, it's one of those things where I'm going to go through my rookie process a little bit more, let the combine happen, that sort of thing, and have a little bit firmer idea of what that 105 is going to be before I kind of really, really make that decision. But the person did make it tough for me, because I did say I would give the 105 for Trevor Lawrence. Because theoretically, that 105 is a wide receiver or tight end, right? Although a high-end one that could bust. But even if they're likely good, we're talking about a young, very talented quarterback in a super flex.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, if you could do it just straight up, I would take the quarterback. But I also learned kind of the hard way last year that picks just get more valuable the closer you get anyway. So it just makes sense to wait.
Yeah. Where are we now?
I think you're up. I just did Jalen Hurts.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So I'll do Josh Jacobs. Right. So one of the first shows that we did together I said put some respect on Josh Jacobs' name. He's 24, first rounder out of Alabama, right? And that was during the oh my gosh, he played in the Hall of Fame game, right? And he went out and had a really, really good season. Now this year, obviously, there's some drop off, right? And I think, the narrative against him is, I think, sound, right? He's a running back, right? He is aging. He's almost 26. And there's certainly a lot of uncertainty. He's a free agent. He's likely not going to be on the Raiders next year. And who knows where he's going to be. And running back is running back. And these days, he could end up on a team being a pretty interesting and annoying timeshare with a receiving back. What if the team that he signs with drafts, I don't know, Bucky Irving, right? And there's Josh Jacobs, basically is a 2-down downhill guy or whatever. That's how they try to use him, and they use Bucky Irving as a passing back. Like, what happens to Josh Jacobs' value? So I think there's a case against him, and I think this is I think for me highlights the role that uncertainty plays in all this. We were talking at the top of the show about coaching, OC, free agency, right? That sort of thing. Like, what do you do, right? And obviously the case against him too also is like he's a running back, and you try not to trade for running backs in like January. Like, I get that, right? But I think he's a good example of uncertainty. The case for him, I think one of the biggest cases for him, and again, this is one of those things, I think he mailed it in this year. I think he got mad at the team. I think the team was ass. I think, he hated the coach and everything about the management and the way they treated him, and he was out the door, right? So I think he kind of mailed it in and played not to get hurt, live to fight another day and get out of Las Vegas and get a contract somewhere else. And I don't think that I would be as worried with that one as I would be with like a Dotson or a Pickens.
Yeah.
Right. And so I don't know that there's ever really a case of like buying an RB at this time of the year, but his cost is probably low, relative to what he's been recently. It's probably a discount. He'll probably likely have a good role no matter where he lands. Well, yeah. I mean, that's the case for him, right? Is that he's good enough and young enough that he'll have some solid role. He's not going to turn into Dalvin Cook all of a sudden, right? I'm pretty high on him still. I think he's going to bounce back. I think relative to the dynasty running back landscape, like it's almost one of those like who else are you going to put above him kind of things. I don't think any of the rookies really are going to slot in, very high, at least initially, right? So I still have him at 8 in a tier of 5 to 9. The crowd doesn't like him as much. KTC is 15. Fantasy Calc is at 13. Traded straight up for Jaden Reed. Jacobs in a 25 first for Diggs. Give me Jacobs in the first. This is an interesting one. This is the one I wanted to ask you about. I think it's a classic like contender buying a couple low valued, not old running backs while they can, and then I think a rebuilder grabbing talent and a pick. But it's Jacobs and Ramondre on one side, and Rashee Rice and a 25 first on the other. Like now, at first I'm like, give me Rice in the first, right? And I get that. I probably still, probably 51 times out of 100 at least, I'm gonna do that. But like if you think you're gonna be in the top like 2-3 teams next year in your league, right? And you can get running backs who are, below 26 for that price, 2 of them who have shown, they can produce in the NFL. Like, I don't know. Am I crazy? Thinking a contender might do that?
Yeah, I'm a lot higher on Rashee Rice. I was taking him early to middle second round last year in the drafts. So I think honestly a little bit of my bias and impartiality is showing with this. I would still rather have Rice if I'm trying to win, just because I think having the number one receiver in that offense, and I think now that he's gained the trust, and I don't see that anything changing, I think he's going to be really valuable. But I get it. Like if you're a top 1 or 2 team and you only have like one good running back that you can throw out there, it does make sense. I would have tried to trade different players than Rashee Rice.
And I think in general, there's a good rule that buy into running backs later in the offseason. But if you were going to do that kind of deal, I don't think this is a terrible one. I think another thing that makes me think that he's going to have a pretty good role is that the 2024 running back class is like, I think people are a little too down on it, but like it is pretty like flat. There's no like standouts. There's solid guys like the gap between the whoever the RB1 is and the RB7 isn't as big as it was, in previous years. But like that RB1 isn't as good as it was in previous years. But anyway, that class and the free agent class aren't very impressive. And so I think there's going to be a spot for Jacobs. Jamie thinks it's still going to be on the Raiders. I doubt it. I think that relationship is over. But so I think either way, he's a guy that is at this sort of uncertainty crossroads thing that I think I'm willing to take the optimistic side of.
Yeah, I haven't ranked 12th, so I'm a little bit lower, but not much. If he stays with the Raiders, it'll just be because of Antonio Pierce, because once Pierce took over, they started funneling the ball through him.
Yeah.
But I think at that point, he was just kind of, like you said, checked out for the year. So either way, I don't think he's going to drop. If he's with the Raiders, he'll get a lot of touches. If he goes somewhere else, I think he's going to be one of the main guys. I don't see someone going out and getting him just to put him in like a 1A, 1B committee.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I'm on the last one. I'm going to talk about another running back. This one's Damian Pierce. This is another one where I'm trusting my process and even trusting the film and the data this year. I still have him ranked as running back 35. KTC has him at 45, Fantasy Calc at 47, so I'm above market still. And just watching him play, I still think the ability is there for him to run missed tackles. He is like 0.27 missed tackles per attempt, is right in line with Bijan, Brees, and James Conner. So I don't think he's a bad runner. I don't think he's just getting hit and going down. The blocking was terrible. Pierce he didn't even get a half yard before he was getting hit by contact this year. Singletary's is higher, so I don't know if that's just they got their run game going a little later on in the year once Pierce got hurt and got faded. But he did not have good blocking. He's not great at zone schemes, but he's also not as bad as I thought he would be. The difference between him and Singletary, it's not as bad as I thought. So I still think he's got plenty of ability to learn zone blocking and be able to make reads quicker. And I really don't know the path moving forward, but I think there are enough teams that need running backs to where he'll be at least like running back 30 and be useful in bye weeks and stuff. So.
All right, before I hop in, I'll just say hi to Toronto Dave. Always good to see you in the chat. Thanks for saying hi. So this was the one on the show sheet where I was like, really? This is a tough one? Okay, let me hear. And I get where you're coming from. I think what discouraged me about it was towards the end of the year, the quotes from, I guess, the coach or Slowick or whatever, were like almost thinly veiled, like, yeah, he doesn't really fit our team. We don't know what to do with him, And the fact that he's still on his rookie contract and is kind of ostensibly trapped there, because why would you give up a cheap running back? Just he's a body, right? He's a cheap body. No reason to cut him or trade him or anything like that, just because he's not great for a zone scheme. If anything, they bring in another zone guy and, he's even lower. Like, He worries me. He's a guy that worries me. But I think this might be, again, colored by my priors, because going into his rookie season, he was like my running back, I don't know, like 9, I think. And I gave shout outs to folks who were in on Pierce as like one of their top 3 running backs, because he did have a solid rookie season. Got hurt a little bit towards the end, but he worries me, right? He's a, not the day 3 running back is the curse that it used to be, but he's a day 3 running back in a new regime that, he doesn't fit the scheme. I just don't see a path for him to improve enough on his acquisition cost for me to be all that into it. I'd love to be wrong, but yeah, I have him at 51, so I think I'm a little.
So he actually ran a kickoff return for a touchdown, showing speed and explosive. I'm not I don't know if Sloak's going to be there next year. I think he's
That's
going to
true.
I think he's going to get another coaching opportunity. And I think looking at this roster, even if they go get a rookie running back, I don't see why someone would come in and just force his own system in there. I don't see why you would want Singletary as your number one running back. So I'm just being hopelessly optimistic that Sloak goes on somewhere else, hopefully the Falcons. And they get
Oh no, you're getting Billy Boy down there.
No, I know. Which I was gonna touch on that at the very end. I'm not too happy about that, if I'm being honest. But I'm just hoping that Slowick gets an upgrade in his coaching position and they bring someone in who's not so zone reliant. So
okay, all right, no, that's fair because he probably will get a head, like he'll probably have a job to pick from. Whether he picks it is another story, but I think he'll have a job to pick. But yeah, when I saw Bill Belichick's second interview, I was like, God damn it. Because all I've ever wanted for the Falcons and for you is like an offensive innovator to go in there with Justin Fields or whoever and Drake London and Pitts and Bijan and have a ball, and now it's like the boomer of all boomers is going to be the coach.
We got Arthur Smith. Now we're getting Bill Belichick. Great. Also, Jim Harbaugh has been touted around as interviewing. I don't want either one of them. I've watched Michigan play offense. I want Ben Johnson or Sloak. I want a young head coach that's offensive minded.
Do you think they're smart enough to hire, for lack of a better phrase, the next Sloak Ben Johnson as an OC if they got the head coaching job there? Has Bill learned enough that he doesn't know enough about this and the game has passed him by? He needs to adjust. And is he promising Arthur or whatever, the blank or whatever? Is he saying I'll hire, I'll run the defense, but we're going to get some offensive juice in there. Do you trust Bill Belichick to hire a good offensive coordinator?
No, he hired Matt Patricia as their offensive coordinator one year. Absolutely not. I just think he's stubborn. He just comes across that way. I could be wrong. Maybe he's going to have a resurgence, but I have no faith in him. I don't want to see the next Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez duo in Atlanta. I don't want to see that. I just want it to be Pitts, London, and Bijan, and that's it.
Yeah, Dave here pushing some buttons with the Jonnu stuff, which is interesting.
He's not wrong.
Which is right. Wrong. I know, right? But which is interesting because Jonnu just played for Belichick before coming to Atlanta. So yeah. All right, my last guy is Waddle, Jalen Waddle. He's really interesting to me. He's a guy I liked coming out of school. I liked him more than some other guys who some folks had ahead of him. I think we saw in the rookie year really good numbers in what he can do. We saw that since Tyreek is there, he's understandably taken a back seat, right? I think because of the draft capital and the talent, I kind of was fading the haters a little bit, this idea that, Waddle is just part of that, tier of a million wide receiver twos and all that. And, I was defending him that, he probably should be the wide receiver 6 or 7 in Dynasty. Is he maybe drafted a little too early in startup? Sure, but he probably should be the wide receiver 6 or 7. And, we've had a bit of trouble since Tyreek has been there. Now, the good thing is Tyreek is aging and has said he's going to retire, right? And so Tyreek is older than AJ Brown is, right? So there's a reason to maybe like Waddle more than say you like Devonta Smith, right? Still had electric flashes this year, but here's the problem with him, right? Not only the overall results, and sort of the idea that he kind of came back to the earth when it comes to efficiency, but he's always dinged up. When you watch a game with Jalen Waddle, he's in the medical tent every 3 plays. He's doing something, tweaking an ankle or a knee or a foot, he's always getting dinged up, and you never want to call a player injury prone or whatever, but when that happens, there's certainly cause for concern. The question is, has he slipped enough to become a buy, right? Is the cost still worth it, right? when you have guys that you can re-roll on, like Xavier Worthy, Troy Franklin, Brian Thomas, right, coming in the rookie class, would you give up, right, like the draft pick that would probably pick one of those guys to get Waddle? I don't know. That, like, I'm not so sure, right? So I have him ranked now down at 14, and I loved him. I had him at, like, 6, 7 for the longest time. I'm at 14 in that tier of 10 to 19. I'm a little closer to consensus on this one than some of the others. KTC is 13. Fantasy Calc is 11. He has gone straight up for Tyreek, which I found interesting. I put in there in the show sheet, sort of an age thing, right? Probably like contender versus team that didn't need the old guy. Waddle and Elijah Moore for Aaron Jones and T. Higgins, which is interesting. Like, as much as I like Waddle, I think Aaron Jones is going to be sneaky good next year. And also, like, T. Higgins could be like a wide receiver one somewhere else, whereas Elijah Moore, I think there's a lot more reason to doubt his floor. So I'm probably taking the Jones and Higgins side on that one. Waddle and Gibbs for Purdy and Eckler. Like, I'm smashing Waddle and Gibbs on that one. Waddle, Olave, and Ridley for Justin Jefferson in the 4th. What do you think about that one? The 3 receivers for the 1. Waddle, Olave, and Ridley for Justin Jefferson and a 4th.
It's kind of like you said, tearing down when we were talking about Jamar Chase. I think I'm going to take Justin Jefferson in that one. I've just never seen a wide receiver play like that since Calvin Johnson. So, I mean, I don't have any shares of Justin Jefferson. It just, when I'm picking 4th or 5th, I'm taking a quarterback. When I'm picking 10th or 11th, he's always gone. So it's just, I don't have any shares. I really want one, so I would give that up to get him, because there's question marks with Olave as well as Waddle. So, yeah, give me Justin Jefferson.
I think you brought up a point that, like, one thing I wanted to touch on early in the show is there's a million guys that we could have listed, right? Like, Olave, off the top of my head, is one of them, right? Like, he's a good guy for this show. The, like, is he really for real, right? Or, that sort of thing. And like, should he really be ranked up there with guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown and Garrett Wilson and Puka, right? I think that's a legit conversation to have. So I would take Jefferson there. I think, we think Tyreek is retiring soon. The team will probably add a pass catcher, but probably not a big one, right? Like, they've got O-line needs, so I don't think they're going to add anybody that kind of really threatens the targets of either Tyreek or Waddle enough. They are negative in cap space by around $50 million, which influences it. And also the free agent class in wide receivers isn't very good either. Like, I don't think like T. Higgins, for example, is going to end up in Miami, right? So, everybody's always a buy and a sell, right? Depending on context and price. But I think Waddle's a guy that, while I do recognize that I have dropped him for good reason, I think there's a reason to maybe be in at cost with the expectation that that his value will rise.
Yeah, that's what it's going to be, because he played 14 games this year and just barely cleared 1,000 yards, which 14 games isn't that bad, but you do want a little more than 1,000 yards and 3 or 4 touchdowns with where you're drafting him. And just, who I'd like to see in Miami, is Curtis Samuel. Someone like that I think would be another good fit. Lockett, but I think that would just hurt their cap space, because I'm pretty sure Lockett's still going to require a little bit of a bigger contract. But I think someone like Curtis Samuel would be fun.
Yeah, but like at 21, they have pick 21 and 55. Pick 85 has been forfeited as part of that nonsense that they did. So, like, I don't see them spending either of those picks on a wide receiver, but
no.
All right, is that it? That's the last of our. All right, time to land the plane on this sucker. Hopefully we weren't too rusty in the first time back live in a while. Please subscribe, rate, and review on the Going for Two live podcast feed. Please make sure here on the visuals that you subscribe, like, turn on notifications, etc. Time for plugs. Josh, where can we find you and your work?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Rotonaut, ROTONAUT. I'm just now going through and redoing my Dynasty rankings. I'll officially do them once the season ends, post those for the offseason up until rookie stuff, and hopefully get some rookie profiles out. I did a little blurb on Troy Franklin with a collab article on gofor2.com. You can find that on the website. That's where my rankings are as well.
All right. Just want to say same to you, Jamie. Good to see you. It's good to be back, and you enjoy the rest of your weekend too. You can find me at ffjunkie_ on Twitter. Rankings on goingfor2.com. Probably will be writing a few rookie profiles this year for the website, as is, tis the season. We're going to definitely obviously be doing more rookie stuff in the next coming month or so. You can find me also on Dynasty Fever at Dynasty Fever Pod on Twitter, that I do with Jesse Schneeman from DWZ. He took January off from podcasting, which I think was a great idea. And so we're going to get back together soon. I was thinking maybe I would pump out an episode or two with a guest, but hey, man, life gets lifey, and here we are. Please make sure that you check out goingfor2.com. On the bottom right, there's a little purple thing that links to our Discord, which is free. There's a million channels, every fantasy football topic possible. People discussing trades all the time and getting advice. This show has our own channel. You can post updates on the show. Also, Going for Two has pretty much a podcast, a live show for just about every day or night of the week here on this YouTube channel if you're watching, and the other places that we stream as well. We did it. We're back live. Yeah. That's a wrap. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
Go Irish.
All right.
Aldrich SMA RB1.
Oh, Jesus.